January 5th, 1942. Two German officers stride through the stone corridors of Colditz Castle, the most escape-proof prison in the entire Third Reich. Guard dogs patrol the grounds. Searchlights rake every wall. Armed sentries line every parapet. A full battalion stands watch, one soldier for every two prisoners. Field Marshal Goering himself declared this fortress unbreakable. But something about these two officers is wrong. Their buttons are crude lead casts, poured from stolen plumbing over candle flames. The holster is carved from linoleum floor tile. The belt is painted cardboard. A single hard look kills the disguise. And right now, a German sergeant sits 10 feet ahead, bathed in electric light. One of these men is British Lieutenant Neve. 6 months earlier, he attempted this exact escape. The scenery paint on his cap glowed bright green under the searchlights. The guards didn't shoot. They laughed. Tonight, every single component has been rebuilt from scratch. But here is the thing no one expects. The man the Third Reich locked inside these walls will one day walk into Nuremberg. He will force those same commanders to read the charges against their own empire. What drove him to attempt the same suicide mission twice? What did that first catastrophic failure teach him? May 1940, northern France. German panzer divisions have torn through Allied lines. They are pouring toward the English Channel like water through a cracked dam. In the port city of Calais, a thin rear guard of British troops fights to slow the advance. Their purpose? Buying hours for the evacuation at Dunkirk, 26 miles northeast. Lieutenant Neve commands a ragged troop from the 1st Searchlight Regiment, Royal Artillery. 24 years old, fresh from a law degree at Oxford. His men, he described them himself, an ill-assorted, randomly equipped unit, separated from their original positions and armed with whatever they could scrounge. Neve is not a career soldier. He is a lawyer, handed a rifle and told to hold a port city against tanks. Their job is not to win, their job is to make the Germans bleed for every block, every alley, every bridge on the road to the harbour, so that 300,000 men can board boats at Dunkirk. Nobody in Calais expects to come home. They are purchasing time with their own lives, so the British Army survives to fight another day. Without Calais holding, Dunkirk collapses. Neve knows this. Every man standing beside him knows it. They are fighting to make their deaths count for something. The garrison holds fewer than 400 men against 2 full panzer divisions. Artillery barrages shake the medieval walls of the old town until mortar dust rains from the ceilings. Tracer rounds stitch the air red. Smoke turns the sky a dirty orange above the port. Streets choked with abandoned vehicles, shattered glass, and men who stopped moving hours ago. Neve leads his soldiers across an open square toward the docks. A shell detonates nearby. White-hot shrapnel tears through his right thigh. He collapses into burning rubble, drags himself upright, keeps moving on one good leg. His orders are simple: hold the line, whatever the cost. Around him, men drop and do not rise. The Germans are not slowing down. Every minute Neve's rear guard holds is another minute for the boats at Dunkirk. Every man here understands the math. May 23rd, 1940. A German officer finds Neve crawling through the wreckage, uniform shredded, legs soaked in blood. The fight for Calais is over. Neve is hauled to his feet, 24 years old, wounded, a prisoner of war. From this moment, Neve has exactly one objective: undo every part of that sentence except the first. Transport trucks haul him east, deep into Germany. He passes through Oflag 9A/H near Spangenberg Castle. Months go by. He spends them studying fences, memorizing sentry rotations, cataloguing every weakness in the perimeter like a man building a blueprint in his skull. February 1941. Transfer to Stalag 20A, near Thorn, in occupied western Poland. New camp, same routine. Neve paces the wire, maps the gaps, files away every detail. Captivity is a sentence he has no intention of serving. April 1941. He and a fellow officer, Norman Forbes, slip out of Thorn under cover of darkness. They head east, towards Soviet-controlled territory. For days they move through moonless Polish forests, sleeping in ditches, navigating by memory and a stolen compass. No supply line, no backup, just two men walking toward a border that might as well be on the other side of the earth. Then, near a rail junction at Elk, dawn catches them in open ground. No ditch deep enough, no tree line close enough. A Gestapo car skids to a halt on the road ahead. Two officers step out, rifles leveled. Neve raises his hands. Days of walking through frozen forest, sleeping in filth, eating almost nothing, all of it erased on a country road, in 30 seconds of bad light. That second failure seals his classification. The Germans label Neve a persistent escaper, a Luftgeist. They ship him to the one place designed to hold men exactly like him. May 1941. His boots strike the cobblestones of Colditz Castle's inner courtyard. The cliff drops 75 meters to the river below. Sentries salute. Prisoners stare down from barred windows. The walls, 2 meters thick. Every previous escape attempt from this castle has failed. Colditz has held French generals, Polish colonels, British commando officers, men with every reason and every skill to run. Not one of them has made it home. The system is certain it has him locked down for good. But how do you cage a man who treats every locked door as a puzzle, who files every failed attempt under quote, _1, __? What happens when the Reich's most dangerous escape artists end up locked inside the same building and start comparing notes? Inside Colditz, the world contracts to stone corridors, barred windows, and that endless drop to the river. Winter air slices through the cells like a blade. Searchlights carve the darkness every few seconds, white stripes dragging across the ceiling. Guard dogs strain on chains in the corner yards. Over 500 officers, British, French, Polish, Dutch, Belgian, packed into cramped sleeping quarters, hard bunks, constant surveillance. A full German battalion guards the castle. Roughly one soldier for every 2 prisoners. No work detail, no labor assignment, no way to fill the hours with purpose. Just stone walls. Head counts 4 times a day. And the knowledge that the cliff outside the window plunges 75 meters to frozen water. The monotony is deliberate. Boredom, cold, overcrowding. The Germans wield them as effectively as barbed wire. But the Germans have made a catastrophic miscalculation. By concentrating every escape artist in a single castle, they have built an academy of defiance. French officers who tunneled out of camps in Bavaria trade intelligence with Polish soldiers who forge documents in Silesia. Dutch prisoners run German accent coaching sessions in their cells. An escape committee, a dozen hard faces crouched under blankets, candlelight throwing shadows across the stone, convenes after every roll call. Their job is coordination. One group's breakout cannot compromise another's cover. Escape officers track every scheme in motion. They ration scarce materials, dye, wire, forged documents, and enforce a strict queue so the castle doesn't erupt into simultaneous chaos. Neve sits among them, intense, quiet, watching. Colditz was designed to crush men like him. Instead, it is welding them into a collective intelligence network more sophisticated than any single escape plan could ever be. Neve's own scheme takes shape that summer. British prisoners stage theatrical performances in a small hall inside the castle. Concerts, plays, variety shows. German officers attend from the front rows, laughing at the entertainment. Beneath the theatre's wooden stage, Neve and his team have mapped a route. A trapdoor drops into a storeroom. That storeroom connects through a ceiling passage above the guardhouse to the German side of the castle. The entire plan hinges on a psychological blind spot, and it nearly succeeds. Sentries watch for prisoners scaling walls, cutting wire, tunneling beneath floors. Nobody watches for officers strolling calmly out through the German quarters. On the night of August 28, 1941, Neve pulls on his disguise, a Polish greatcoat, dyed field grey, a black officer's cap, slathered in scenery paint, a cardboard belt painted silver, and marches toward the guardhouse with two others. A spotlight blazes white. A guard shouts, "Halt!" Under that searing flood of electric light, the paint on Neve's cap fluoresces. Not dark, not dull. Bright, radioactive green, visible from 30 meters. The guards freeze for a beat, then burst out laughing. Paul P.M., the German security officer, strolls over. He inspects the glowing cap with theatrical amusement, then delivers his verdict. Corporal Neve is to be sent to the Russian front. 6 months of planning, every stolen scrap of material, every rehearsed step, exposed by a tin of cheap paint nobody thought to test under a searchlight. Mocking salutes follow Neve down the corridor to solitary confinement. In that cell, silence presses from every wall. The humiliation carves deeper than any punishment could. The concept was sound: walk out disguised as a German officer. Exploit the one direction sentries never watch. But the execution was amateurish. Cheap paint that betrayed him under strong light. Materials no one verified. A rushed timeline with zero margin for error. He sits on the narrow bunk, turns the handcuffs on his wrists, and makes a cold, surgical decision. The strategy survives. Every physical component gets rebuilt from scratch, stress-tested under conditions identical to the real escape, perfected, before he risks his life on that same corridor again. If Kolditz was engineered to break defiance, it chose the wrong man. He has no materials, no outside contact, no guarantee the next attempt won't end the same way. But perfecting a disguise that fools trained soldiers under electric light, that is one problem. Finding a partner who speaks native quality German without a trace of British accent is an entirely different problem. Where inside this stone cage will Neve locate someone skilled enough and reckless enough to walk back through that same corridor beside him? And when he does find that person, what will it cost both of them to get it right this time? Winter, 1941. Months grind past. Neve watches everything. During meals, he charts guard rotations. At roll calls, he times every sentry's patrol down to the second. He memorizes faces, rank insignia, habits. Which guard reaches for a cigarette at the same corner each night? Which sergeant hangs back near the gate when rain starts falling? Which shift change drifts 3 minutes behind schedule on Sundays? He writes nothing down. One scrap of paper discovered during a search, and it's over. Every observation gets filed straight into memory, cross-referenced against every other observation. A bored guard here, a lazy search there. A shift change that runs like clockwork, except when it doesn't. Each gap becomes ammunition, stored for the moment it matters most. His partner surfaces from the Dutch contingent, Lieutenant Lutine, calm, sharp-eyed, and carrying a skill that money can't buy. He speaks German without a single foreign fingerprint, not textbook German, not cautious, overly precise German, native German, the kind where no word arrives a beat too late, no consonant lands too soft, no ghost of another language hums beneath the surface. Neve has spent weeks vetting candidates, quiet conversations in shadowed corners of the yard, listening, always listening, for that split-second hesitation, the tiny stumble that gets them both shot at the first checkpoint. Lutine has no stumble. Neve has the reckless nerve. Lutine has the flawless tongue. Together, they form a unit designed to exploit the single crack Neve spotted back in August, the blind assumption that no prisoner would simply walk out through the German side of the castle dressed as one of their own. They gut every trace of the first attempt. Nothing improvised this time. Not one element left to chance. A Dutch overcoat is stripped bare, re-dyed, and tailored to the precise shade of Wehrmacht Feldgrau. Scraps of lead plumbing get pried from the castle walls, melted over smuggled candle stubs, and poured into hand-carved button molds. Niamh blows on each cooling button until the weight and sheen match genuine German brass. Linoleum torn from dormitory floors is boiled, shaped, and rubbed until it could pass for a leather holster. A belt gets fashioned from cardboard, painted, buffed, and polished until it gleams like regulation issue. Every single component is tested by candlelight, then tested again under a hoarded electric torch. They work through pitch-black hours past dawn, rebuilding the same disguise that failed them before. Except now, each piece could survive a second look. Consider subscribing if this story holds you. Most viewers watching right now haven't yet, and one tap helps these stories find more people. The disguise was finished. Now they needed a door. The escape route is sharpened too. Beneath the theatre stage, they've cut a trap door, dropping into a storeroom. From that storeroom, a corridor runs directly above the German guardhouse and opens onto the officers' courtyard on the Nazi side of the castle. The plan's boldness is its disguise. Sentries scan for prisoners, scaling walls, cutting wire, burrowing under floors. Nobody scans for two German officers strolling casually out the front gate. Beyond the castle walls, a Dutch prisoner captured near the Swiss border town of Singen has delivered critical intelligence. Gestapo checkpoint patterns, crossing points. This man walked the exact roads Niamh and Lutine will travel. He knows which railway platforms run permanent identity checks and which ones only search on market days. He knows the 2-kilometer stretch of border wire near Zingen where the gap between patrols runs longest. He was caught. But he was caught making a different mistake, on a different road. Niamh and Lutine commit every detail to memory. Train schedules, border patrol timings, the names of towns where identity checks hit hardest. The date is locked, January 5th, 1942. That evening, British prisoners mount a theatrical performance inside Colditz Castle. German officers fill the front rows. A single drowsy guard watches the gate, and backstage, hidden in the darkness above the stage, 4 men wait. Niamh, Lutine, 1 British officer, 1 Dutch officer. Their uniforms are pressed crisp. Forged papers sit folded in breast pockets. Lead buttons catch the faintest sliver of light. The curtain drops on the final act. Applause swells through the hall. Somewhere below, a guard yawns. 5 months of obsessive preparation now compress into the next 90 seconds. 5 months of memorizing guard rotations, testing button molds by candlelight, drilling German phrases until they roll off the tongue without a single conscious thought. 1 bad button ends it. 1 guard who looks a beat too long ends it. 1 card player who wanders into the hallway for a cigarette at the wrong second ends it. Because there is one variable Niamh cannot control. The trapdoor passes directly over a room where German soldiers play cards deep into the night. If even one of them drifts into that corridor, 4 men in counterfeit uniforms are standing exactly where no prisoner on earth should be. And if the disguise holds, what waits on the other side of the wire? Applause rolls through the theatre as the final curtain falls. German officers in the front rows clap politely. The last stagehands slip off stage. In the blackness above, 4 men crouch over the trapdoor. Niamh pulls the rope. The hatch swings wide. They drop into the storeroom below. A plank groans under the impact, but the sound vanishes beneath applause still rumbling through the floorboards. Light bleeds from the hallway beyond. They flatten against the wall. Listen. Silence. They push open a metal door and step into the corridor above the guardhouse, the German side of Colditz Castle, territory where no prisoner has any right to breathe. Niamh straightens his Feldgrau coat. Lutine adjusts his officer's cap. They exchange the parole word in whispered German, a phrase overheard from a guard 3 weeks earlier. Below them, a sergeant hunches over his desk, scrawling reports. Two officers descend the staircase. He glances up, nods without interest, returns to his paperwork. They cross to a small door and step into the outer courtyard. Cold air floods their lungs. A solitary sentry stands at ease beneath the stone archway, separating the castle from the outside world. Neve's pulse hammers against his throat. They carry themselves like officers returning from late duty. Unhurried, shoulders square, boots striking flagstones in confident rhythm. The sentry's eyes track them. He hesitates. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then they pass beneath the arch and through the gate, walking in the one direction no escaper in the history of Colditz has ever gone. Straight out the front door of the German command block. Bitter wind slaps their faces. They drop into the dry moat, scramble across, and scale the outer wall into Colditz Park. Moonlit trees swallow them whole. They tear off their German caps and coats, stuffing them beneath brush, revealing civilian clothes layered underneath, worn jackets, shabby hats, the disguise of Westphalian factory workers. Lutin grins in the dark. They have just walked out of the most secure prison in the Third Reich in under 5 minutes. They split up to halve the risk. Neve climbs aboard a freight train at Litznik before first light. A German newspaper spread across his knees, pure theatre. A regional line carries him south. Every station platform is a coin toss. A conductor who looks too long. A policeman standing where he shouldn't be. A checkpoint nobody mentioned. At Ulm he switches trains for Singen, the final German town before Switzerland. Outside Singen, he finds Lutin again near a forest road. 2 Hitler Youth boys block the path, rifles hanging from their shoulders. They stop every man who passes. They inform Neve and Lutin they are hunting 2 escaped prisoners of war spotted somewhere in the district. Neve holds out his forged papers with hands that tremble on purpose. A jittery factory worker from Cologne, nothing worth a second glance. The boys examine the documents. One lowers his rifle barrel. The other shrugs, jerks his chin forward. The 2 fugitives they are searching for stand 5 feet away and walk past them without a word spoken. At midnight, they reach the border wire. Snow blankets the ground, glowing faintly beneath a sliver of moon. They drag themselves through knotted, barbed wire in pitch-black cold. Coats catching on rusted barbs, fingers dead, scraping uphill towards Swiss soil. The temperature has plunged well below 0. They gain altitude in inches. Neve's fingers split open against frozen metal. Then the earth flattens. A signpost materializes in the darkness, its lettering Swiss. They stagger into the village of Ramsen, hearts slamming so violently the sound seems to echo down the empty street. A Swiss border guard sits on a bench nearby, dragging on a cigarette in the freezing air. Neve forces himself upright, crosses to the man on trembling legs, and claps the startled guard on the shoulder in broken Swiss German. 84 hours have passed since the trapdoor swung open beneath the theatre stage at Colditz. Ari Neve becomes the first British officer to escape Colditz Castle. A brutal journey follows, through France, over the Pyrenees, through Gibraltar, before he sets foot in England and receives the military cross. But Colditz was never the destination. It was the proving ground. What do you offer a man who memorized every corridor of an escape-proof fortress and walked through it dressed in the enemy's uniform? And what happens when the Reich that caged him finally crumbles, and someone must enter its ruins to confront the men who built it? My 9 recruits Neve immediately. This covert branch operates escape networks spanning occupied Europe, the Polin line threading through southern France, the Comet line running through Belgium, both funneling over the Pyrenees into Spain. Neve, codenamed Saturday, now engineers the tools that keep these lifelines functioning. Compasses concealed inside buttons, silk maps stitched into coat linings, forged documents smuggled into prison camps inside hollowed-out chess pieces. He draws every corridor of Colditz from memory, handing my 9 precise floor plans for future operations. He trains downed air crews in evasion, teaching the exact methods that carried him from Saxony to Switzerland. By the war's end, the networks Neve helps run have guided roughly 7,000 Allied airmen and soldiers out of occupied Europe and back to Britain. The man who once clawed through barbed wire alone now orchestrates freedom on an industrial scale. Then comes the reckoning. Nazi Germany collapses in 1945. The victors demand justice. The regime's most powerful leaders sit locked in cells at Nuremberg, the same men who once caged Neve behind 2-meter walls. Neve is chosen to serve the indictments personally, defendant by defendant, cell by cell, face to face. Picture the geometry of that moment. Just 3 years earlier, these men decided whether Neve ate, whether he slept, whether he froze to death behind barbed wire. Now the former prisoner carries documents that will decide whether they live or hang. Dawn light spills into the prison corridor. Neve holds a stack of heavy packets, formal charges from the International Military Tribunal, each one cataloguing specific atrocities attributed to the man waiting behind the cell door. First cell, Hermann Göring, former Reichsmarshal, the second most powerful man in the Third Reich. Göring rises from his cot, reaches for the papers with theatrical contempt. Neve slides the indictment through the grill, watches Göring's eyes crawl down the pages. Cell by cell, Neve moves down the row. Rudolf Hess mumbles, incoherent, lost. Albert Speer's jaw tightens. Wilhelm Keitel goes white. In each dim cell, Neve reads the defendant's name in German, places the documents on the table, signs the receipt of service. The man who once begged for scraps of bread behind stone walls now holds the pen that opens the largest war crimes trial in human history. After Nuremberg, Neve steps back into civilian life. He wins the Conservative seat for Abingdon in a 1953 by-election, serves quietly in Parliament for 2 decades. In 1974, he manages Margaret Thatcher's campaign for the Conservative Party leadership. By 1979, he is her Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, positioned to walk into the cabinet the moment the Conservative Party wins the coming election. March 30th, 1979. Westminster, London. Neve finishes a day's work at the House of Commons, walks to his car. A magnetic bomb, fixed beneath the chassis by an Irish National Liberation Army operative, detonates as the car climbs the exit ramp. The explosion rips through the vehicle in full view of Parliament. Airy Neve, the man who survived shellfire at Calais, the Gestapo at Elk, the stone corridors of Colditz, dead, 100 yards from the House of Commons. Weeks before the election that sweeps Thatcher into Downing Street, he never sees it. The cabinet seat he earned sits empty. That afternoon, Margaret Thatcher stands before cameras. Her voice breaks. She calls Neve an incalculable loss. The Irish National Liberation Army is subsequently banned across the United Kingdom. His story answers the question it posed from the very first breath. A man stood in a stone corridor, wearing a uniform stitched from lead scraps, linoleum, and painted cardboard, and walked through the most secure prison in the Third Reich. Because he refused to accept that any wall was final. He failed once, studied that failure with forensic discipline, rebuilt every component, then walked the same corridor again. Then he freed thousands. Then he carried indictments into the cells of the men who once imprisoned him. Every locked door, Calais, Thorn, Colditz, Nuremberg, he treated not as a fate to accept, but as a problem to solve. The walls only hold if you believe in them. Neve never did.